the monarchy provides, with the Constitution, a degree of long-term stability that is actually quite hard to come by any other way.
Princess Anne's lawyer sealed off Camilla's Norfolk Cottage, leaving royal watchers stunned. Camilla and the princess had always been rumored to be at odds anyway. Still, a bold move to restrict the Queen Consort's access to her estate threatens to create even more media frenzy than the usual Windsor special. What exactly could have triggered this power move? Does Princess Anne really play a part in this property dispute? Join us as we discuss the royal ripple effect surrounding the lawyer's brazen move on Camilla's estate. The royal quake. And yet again, the Windsors take center stage in the United Kingdom, with friendly foes allegedly back at odds, and the royal family is sent into disarray. A legal representative rumored to be tied to the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, had reportedly locked up Camilla's Norfolk Cottage, and sources close to the Queen Consort believed that the incident unsettled her. But just how suspicious could she really be of Princess Anne's involvement? And why would anyone want to lock up the Queen's cottage? It all started with the usual rumors, the same ones that had kept the Windsors sitting on a knife edge for well over a decade. It was the usual Princess Anne versus Queen Camilla beef all over again, but this time spiced up with reported indirect attacks with significant effects on who controls what. Talking about control, Princess Anne, who had always been a highly regarded member of the royal family, has somehow always found her way to the forefront of the English media. Numerous pictures of her in meetings with the top brass of the United Kingdom's political scene, hosting ceremonial royal events, and making important appearances at charity events, had placed her among the hardest-working members of the female Windsors. However, sitting unchallenged at the very top of the female Windsors was not a privilege that would last for long, even though it was her birthright. Camilla's marriage to Charles in 2005 brought a new player to the board. Camilla's presence and status shot her right up beside good old King Charles as queen. Royal insiders suggest that the introduction of the Queen Consort Camilla into the Windsor family sparked this quest for the highest-ranking and most powerful female in the Windsor court, with power allegedly shifting behind the scenes between the Princess Royal, Anne, and Queen Camilla. Although the cameras had never really been able to find that perfect shot of their faces conveying messages of competition, or even worse, animosity towards each other, there were plenty of judgments to make from their first-ever entanglement before Camilla became a high-ranking member of the highest class that the United Kingdom had to offer. They had reportedly dated the same man, Brigadier Parker Bowles, a true servant of Queen and country in his time. However, religious reasons reportedly made it almost impossible for the Brigadier and Anne to get married. He was a devout Catholic, and she was a member of the Anglican Church. Although that was a problem for Anne, the Brigadier had married Camilla, who then left him for Charles, allegedly making an enemy of Princess Anne. While the threads of rumors and conjecture began to weave endlessly, it was enough for some to conclude that Anne might have played more than a little role in the sealing of the Sandringham estate in Norfolk and in affecting Camilla in the process. But if Princess Anne really pushed the buttons for this development, why choose Norfolk Cottage at all? Camilla's ties to Norfolk Cottage. The Norfolk property holds a pristine level of sway and importance in the royal setup because it once belonged to Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen and mother of King Charles, and Princess Anne. Over time, sources close to the Queen before her death often claimed that she loved the Norfolk property more than any other estate she owned, especially because it reminded her of country life and family, and because it bore a semblance to the cold, detached life she sometimes preferred. It was the perfect escape into solitude, and was also close enough to a beach she enjoyed. However, possession of the estate soon changed in 2022, following the heartbreaking demise of Queen Elizabeth. As is tradition, ownership of the estate was passed down to King Charles. As expected, he had the privilege of being the first son and heir to the throne. Although royal watchers claimed that the family accepted his possession of the property with the usual smile and respect for British monarchy laws, they also hinted at a possible power struggle between Princess Anne and Queen Consort Camilla. The princess, for obvious reasons, had a natural connection with the estate. especially because she had spent part of her life growing up on the 20,000-acre Norfolk estate. However, Camilla only ever had access to the property as a consequence of her marriage to King Charles in 2005. As a result, royal insiders suggest that both women have often battled behind the scenes for control of proceedings within the estate. Oftentimes, royal watchers claimed that their battle for control stemmed from their contentious argument over the strength of the other's legitimacy over property and rights. Insiders described it as a battle between a born royal and a marriage made royal. However, the Queen Consort, who lived there, often manages the estate, influencing decisions such as where guests stay, which house is used during visits, and how parts of the house are prepared for events, thereby retaining her supremacy as Lady of the House. As a result, it was nigh impossible to shake off her claims or her decisions. Eventually, the Queen Consort retained the estate as a royal residence and a retreat for herself, and of course, King Charles. But time, as always, is so ever kind to every rivalry, unfolding different circumstances as the years pass, shifting powers between both women time and time again. It wasn't long before Prince Andrew Mountbatten picked up residence in the estate, triggering a chain of events that exploded into a controversy. But how exactly does Prince Andrew fit into this silent war for control and property dispute? The disgraced Windsor. Prince Andrew Mountbatten is the typical picture of the royal family's second son. The firstborns, as culture dictates, were immediately taught the values of leadership as they were being prepared for their time on the throne and the progression of family values. While the same is done in theory for every royal lad, a second son, who suddenly began acting out of place, was slowly becoming a Windsor thing. Fewer responsibilities often translated to fewer expectations over time, and slowly but surely created an anomaly: Randy Andy. Prince Andrew, in his heyday, was that young man who was at the heart of fun every chance he got. He was at every party, had a serious dating spree, and of course, had much fewer responsibilities to the crown than his older brother Charles did. Insiders believed that knowing he was born to be a spare to the heir licensed his habits and nearly made him the favorite son of the late Queen Elizabeth, who had reportedly often spared him of his blushes every time he needed some help. However, his life took a turn as the years rolled by. He was often in contact with the late disgraced finance expert, Jeffrey Epstein, a man who had been charged and convicted of illegal child movement from other countries into the United States.
The latest release of the Epstein files has laid bare the extraordinary influence that the American sex trafficker had on key figures in the British establishment.
Although he had often claimed that their relationship was strictly professional, he had invited him to his daughter, Beatrice's 18th birthday, alongside Ghislaine Maxwell. Unfortunately for the spare, the jig was up when Jeffrey Epstein died. As expected, in the name of justice for the kids whose innocence had been destroyed in the wake of Epstein's criminal activities, the United States decidedly chose to conduct an investigation that pried directly into the private meetings and recorded discussions between Epstein and other facilitators of his network, leading them all the way down to the doors of the Windsors. Already, the royal family had had its reputation in flames since the sad demise of Diana, with Camilla and King Charles, especially, bearing the brunt of the blame.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
But this time, Prince Andrew had once again become the antagonist. What used to be a simple partying and drunk fest when he was a teenager had matured into something more sinister, something unforgivable, something to do with underage kids. Although he was first linked to Jeffrey Epstein in the late 90s after they had met through Ghislaine Maxwell, it was not until early 2015 when a certain Virginia Giuffre claimed that she had been made to perform sexual acts with Andrew when she was underage, dragging the Windsor name into an explosive scandal. At first, the general discussion around the claims was watered down as a possible sham from a little girl looking for a payday. But how much darker does it get? Andrew seeks refuge in Norfolk. Following these big accusations in 2015, he fought gallantly like a valiant Windsor hero, claiming that he had no recollection of ever meeting his accuser, let alone having sexual acts with her. For 6 straight years, the claims haunted him like ghosts in a Gothic house, but there was never any headway in getting him to admit to these claims. But yet again, time unkindly passes and sets him right into the middle of the shitstorm that Epstein had left in his wake. The year was 2021, when Giuffre decided to file a civil suit, forcefully reeling in the Windsor and fighting tooth and nail for her claims to be made public. As expected, the Windsors employed their usual strategy, silence, making no fuss about it, and somehow seeming to wait for it to pass. But it was different this time. This was a foe from another country, coming directly for the drama-loving second son. As expected, the Crown chose to protect itself, stripping Prince Andrew of his titles, military and privileges as a Windsor prince, and distancing itself from the mess. Although he was never really found legally guilty, the United Kingdom rank and file, especially Lieutenant Stewart Hunt, considered it an unsavory business and supported the Queen's decision to strip him of his association with the military. Whether he's guilty or not, he has brought things into disrepute. He's not fit to serve in an honorary rank. He has forgone that right by getting into this sort of situation, Lieutenant Stewart Hunt continued. However, it did not stop at properties and military titles. The prince, who used to live at Royal Lodge in Grand Windsor Park, was also stripped of his home, which was once a privilege of his royal status as His Royal Highness, leaving him homeless. But then comes a mother's love. Although he had been stripped of his title, he still had the option of seeking refuge at the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. The 20,000-acre estate always had numerous cottages and more than enough land to keep everyone from each other's sight. There was no better place for him to be than a family estate that existed far and tucked away from the hustle and bustle of the streets of London, and the relentless camera lenses flashing in his face every time he was outside. Following his relocation to the Norfolk estate, he lived in Wood Farm, a place that holds super significance to his person. Wood Farm meant more than just a place to hide to him. It was the home that his father, Prince Philip, retired to when he got older and wanted to be far away from the usual drama, politics, fake smiles, and underhanded handshakes. Sources close to Andrew believed that he had moved to the estate for a reflection on his life and was hoping to dig his way out of a hole that he might have dug for himself in the first place. But will this move to Norfolk be just enough to keep him away from his problems? The Norfolk Cottage rampage. Moving to the Sandringham estate in Norfolk was the last move anyone had expected from Andrew, but of course he was a man in need of refuge, and where better to find one than with family? He is a disgraced prince who had been caught up in an embarrassing tempest of criminality. Hence, moving away from the public seemed like the correct move. While his reputation had been tarnished and dragged through the mud from the United Kingdom to the United States, it was not enough. For some reason, the United Kingdom police still had him in their rearview mirror, waiting for the little bit extra to pounce, and in February 19, 2026, their wait was finally over. Just early enough on a Thursday morning, he was arrested by men in unmarked cars under suspicion of misconduct in public office.
Former Prince Andrew has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office,
investigating his alleged connections with the late sexual offender. For some reason, he just never seemed to get enough of his dealings with the law. Over time, the police had been assessing allegations that Andrew not only shared in Epstein's sex offense and illicit child trafficking ring, but was also sharing sensitive information, especially trade secrets of the United Kingdom. Already, the United States Department of Justice released documents that back up the claims. Hence, he rarely had a way out of his new allegations. The United States had reportedly released details of Andrew Mountbatten's visit to Vietnam, Hong Kong, and Singapore, where he had allegedly met with clients to whom he sold state secrets. But that was not the end of his alleged betrayal of his country, as another email appeared of him sending Epstein a confidential brief on investment opportunities in the reconstruction of Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Although the disgraced prince has always denied any wrongdoing or accusations against him, he has not directly responded to these allegations. According to sources close to him, he predicted that he might find solace and security living in the Norfolk estate. But it wasn't so. Unfortunately, he set a record as the first member of the royal family in the modern era to be arrested by the police. And just like that, the Norfolk estate, which had almost always served as a haven, found itself torn apart from the inside out, searched and turned on its head. While the public remains deeply disappointed with the spare, the real politics was reportedly more internal. According to royal watchers, the Queen Consort, Camilla, and Princess Anne had somehow found an opportunity to yet again fight for control over the Norfolk estate. Royal insiders believe that Camilla, who had been residing at the estate, had always been in control since she chose to make it her permanent residence and a retreat for herself and King Charles. But following Andrew's arrest, royal insiders claim that Princess finally pulled a trick from up her sleeve. What exactly did she do? The Norfolk estate remained sealed. Right after Andrew was captured by the police for his illicit trade with Jeffrey Epstein, a huge part of the estate reportedly had police presence on it. According to insiders, they were in search of more proof to fully tie Andrew to his crimes and finally have him convicted and possibly behind bars. However, not much was found to keep them on the property for that long. But according to insiders, it was more than enough time to help Princess Anne settle on her own plan to have some semblance of control over the estate. Right after the Norfolk Cottage had been ransacked by the police, royal watchers described that parts of the estate had been cordoned off and completely sealed from entry. At first, it seemed as though the police had some extra initiative to keep the estate quiet while the investigation continued. However, sources close to the situation suggest that Princess Anne had set up a simple ploy to have her lawyer draft technicalities from prior arrangements that gave her the right to seal some of the properties on the 20,000-acre property under specific circumstances. Oblivious to this arrangement, Camilla did not see her coming at all. For many years, she had gotten accustomed to being in charge. According to royal watchers, she enjoyed that quite a lot of authority, silently controlling proceedings around Norfolk without anyone really checking her. Insiders report that something shifted within Camilla. She had been played by a born royal, an old head like Princess Anne, who had been in the royal game long before she ever came into the picture. But Anne's indirect use of a lawyer to wrest command from Camilla left more questions than answers. If Anne really did have some clause that gave her control over some parts of the estate, why wait this long to execute her plan? Why wait until her brother, Andrew, was arrested? Royal watchers described the atmosphere in the estate as filled with tension, but there was always one takeaway from Princess Anne's idea to wrest control from Camilla. Insiders had always described her as a super stickler for the rules. However, her choice of the implementation period raised some eyebrows, especially within royal circles. The popular belief among some members of the royal family, according to royal watchers, remains that Princess Anne was simply doing what her mother, the late Queen, would have done. Insiders believe that she opted for damage control by protecting the insides of the place where she made the fondest memories of her childhood, with her brothers, her mother, and father. For some reason, sources close to the situation seem to suggest that she did not believe in leaving that duty to Camilla. Although she is definitely a Windsor, the Princess Royale trusts more in what lengths blood relatives would go for each other. On the flip side, some believe that she is out for herself and looking for her pound of flesh over Camilla, as she still suspects and blames her for Princess Diana's demise. But why would she ever blame her for that? Nostalgia and the thrill of the hunt. While the Norfolk estate represents lush ideas of opulence and the power of serious money to most people, to Princess Anne, it is a piece of architecture with memories that matter to her, one of which is the presence of the late Princess Diana. But what makes it extremely impossible for Princess Anne to let go of precious memories with Diana? Princess Diana, often called the People's Princess, was a very important part of the royal family, as she showed a different side of the Windsors to the United Kingdom. She had more rapport with the people, showing a more humane side to the traditional ruling process and creating a real connection with the common folks. Insiders believe that she struck a rather fun relationship with Princess Anne, who took her under her wings in the royal family, and the duo were almost seemingly best of friends until 1997. Not many dates ring as loudly across the royal estates like August 31, 1997, the day the country lost its princess. Insiders described her as the glue that held both parts of the Windsors together, at least until King Charles chose to have a divorce in 1996. Royal watchers believe that Princess Anne watched from the shadows as Diana was artfully expelled by Camilla, who wove her way into the heart of King Charles. Of course, Anne had history with Camilla, as she had once been left holding the short end of the stick in a three-way relationship with Brigadier Parker Bowles. Consequently, she was no stranger to Camilla's tactics. Over time, Diana's demise came with serious rumors that involved what sources believed that Anne had always suspected: a premeditated homicide disguised as a fatal car crash. However, all she had were words from Diana's old butler, who claimed to have letters that made Charles complicit in her demise. But royal insiders suggest that Anne suspected Camilla of getting into Charles's ear and tuning him towards divorcing Diana in the first place. Hence, she might have also slightly suggested murder to him. Royal watchers claimed that she had been hunting Camilla since she stepped into the marriage with the Windsors, and her stealthy approach to wrest parts of the Norfolk estate from her grasp was a continuous payment in a rivalry that has lasted for ages. To some insiders, the situation starts to feel less and less like a sudden power grab. Instead, they argued it could be a calculated step in a long list of moves, hoping to box Camilla in little by little until she breaks her and gets her revenge for Diana and her kids, letting the truth out in the process. But others believe that closing down parts of the estate stealthily, especially the wood farm, might have more significance than a vengeance streak. Why else could she have cordoned off the estate? Blood before the crown. As expected, royal news often travels like wildfires. Hence, it was no surprise that speculations had started to form like a dark cloud over the Windsors. News of the link between the lawyers who had played a part in sealing parts of the estate and Princess Anne sparked a completely different debate. Some insiders have boldly suggested that she might have cared less about Camilla's control of the estate and even forgiven her possible involvement in Diana's demise, but she could have been going through the trouble to protect the Windsor name. To many insiders in the royal circle, the idea did not sound as far-fetched as most might consider. For some context, her mother, the late Queen Elizabeth, decided to strip Andrew of his title of His Royal Highness, seize his landed properties, and oust him from the military just to protect the crown and show the world that she had washed her hands of him. Yet in 2022, she reportedly gave him whooping £2 million as part of his out-of-court settlement for Joffrey. The message was clear to the rest of her kids: whatever happens, blood comes first. However, it would seem that Princess Anne was the only one who got the memo. According to sources close to the situation, the cottages that were sealed off by Anne had storage rooms, private offices, safes rumored to be used by Prince Philip whenever he hid the good stuff, and several small outbuildings that were somehow connected to Wood Farm. Obviously, these kinds of places were perfect for hiding a thumb drive, personal documents, or anything else that needed to be kept from the public eye. The estate stands at the very point of origin for the Windsors, as they had too many memories built from there, and Princess Anne was not ready to turn it into the grave that buries their family and their name. But at what costs? Would she really be protecting incriminating evidence that could send her brother to jail? Does maintaining the family's reputation really cost that much? Insiders believe that she had answered the questions in the depths of her soul, where she had grappled with fear, duty, and blood, and chose blood. According to insiders, her consistent disagreements with family members over their performance of duty or decisions they made were not enough to keep her from protecting them, even if it meant that a stickler for rules like Anne turns a corner on morals to become the necessary evil the family needs. Whether she really did plan to seal off the place indirectly, or her members of the legal team just happened to work for the investigators, only time will tell. Do you think that Princess Anne could really be behind the sealing of parts of the Norfolk estate? Is there a chance that she could be protecting Andrew regardless of his disturbing shortcomings? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.